Good evening, I am Ahmad Nobari, and there are multiple candidates running for the office of the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, each with his own brand of governance that would ideally fix the nation. Nigeria is said to be on a precipice, a focal point in history. Come 2023, a new administration will chart the course of affairs. Tonight, my guest is Omoyele Sowore, one of the elected presidential candidates on the platform of the African Action Congress. He speaks to me about his life of activism, controversies, his unconventional approach to fixing the country, and his chances at the polls. All right, Mr. Omoyele Sowore, welcome to Top Talk.
Thank you for bringing me.
All right, let's start with something basic and simple. Why do you want to be president?
Because I'm qualified to be president. That's also simple and basic.
All right, I was going to get to that. I was going to ask you what, during the course of your lifetime and your experiences, what has prepared you for this role?
I think every part of my life growing up prepared me for this role. I grew up in what could be described as abject poverty. I grew up not knowing what I deserve as a citizen growing up. I grew up supporting my family at a very early age. I grew up in the midst of plenty kids in a polygamous family. I grew up observing first-hand oppression when I was 9-10 years old, when the police invaded my village in Ondo State. I grew up then understanding that what ought to be government is not what we have governing our spaces.
All right, I don't know if you've been told before, but for someone who is tagged a troublemaker, you're actually soft-spoken. But let's move now to that reputation. People see you as someone who is constantly fighting. Let me just let you in on a joke I heard the other day. I think it was during a trial and you were around, and they said the DSS allegedly were arresting people, and when they saw you, they said, "These are regular customers. They don't bother with you anymore." Yeah. So now I want to know about your activism. What drives you, and why is it that after all these years, because a lot of people know you now, and then they're surprised when they see pictures of you with MQ Abiola, like this man has been doing this all the while. What has sustained you till then, and why do you constantly toe that route?
One was the first was experience. When I was 10 years old, I told you about how the police invaded our village. And when you go into social studies classrooms in the primary school, and they tell you that in civics that government is supposed to protect you. You have rights as citizens, and one day the government you've heard about who's never done anything for you comes around with guns and batons and start beating, molesting and raping people all around you. And you had your entire family terrorized, entire village terrorized, and you woke up the next day and wondering, what kind of government is this? At a very young age, I used to sneak newspapers from my dad and read them, particularly the Sketch and Tribune in those days. And I was just looking forward to getting out there, making it in life. Because things were relatively okay in those days, like if they tell you if you go to school, and you take your studies seriously, you're leaders of tomorrow. We used to wait in the sun on Independence Day, even though if nobody's coming around, it could be a local government official, we just wait there, hoping that one day we'll be the people that will be visiting. You come across just naked and brute force and decimates your faith and belief in your country. That's the first exposure, and that's where I then started on my own. You have these internalized conversations that if I grow up, I will not let this happen again. And then the next time you step into university, and there's a protest brewing, and you participate in it, and it's like exciting. That finally you got to the barricades where you can start to demolish or confront oppression or repression. and then you are pulled out of a crowd, and you find yourself in a police station, and the police brutalizes you like really bad. The next day, while you're still nursing your injury, the university expels you for expressing your rights. And then the next time you are in court and you meet judges who don't believe in justice. And in 1992, there was a peaceful protest, and police came, killed people all around us, arrested us, and they were expelled. My life just changed completely, because then I had to figure out how to finish my studies, complete my studies. Because the expulsion letter, I wish I have a copy today, made it explicitly clear that not only was I expelled from the University of Lagos, that no university in Nigeria will be allowed to admit me ever again. So my dad brought the letter to Lagos, showed it to my uncle and said, look, can you help me just figure out how we can get this guy back to the village? Maybe he can be a teacher, or, you know, just do something at a local level. He's not going to make it beyond this letter. So you have to start looking beyond that stoppage in your career and life. And one thing just led to the other. By 1993, when I was supposed to graduate, the June 12th election, a judge free and fair was annulled. And we're like, no, this is not going to happen in our lifetime. I was a student union president, and I was supposed to be preparing for exams when this happened. So we went to war, practically, and fought the military, expelled again. I was almost killed. I was detained several times. By the time I left Nigeria to go to the US in 1999, I had been detained 8 times. After I came back to Nigeria in 2017, till now, I think I've been detained another 5 times. Just because you couldn't just deal with the nature of oppression and the fact that you always thought maybe there will be a day, there will be a break, I'll go on vacation, I can live with my kids, you know, live in a village and have a little garden at the back of the house. It never came to pass. And it's so for millions and millions of our people. So the challenge is just something you can't walk away from if you have conscience. But for a lot of people who have had to be confronted with a series of this adversity, they have given up. Some are scandalized for life, some are scared for life, some are traumatized for life. Some people have gone through just one thing I've gone through, and they don't talk to people anymore. They don't want to hear about Nigeria. A lot of people have given up, a lot of people left, and so many people left Nigeria in the 90s. Some of them have never come back. You know, but for some of us, we just can't let go, because yes, we've seen the world is beautiful. You can own a car, own a house easily, travel, go on vacation, find great jobs. But you look at 200 million people here who can't even find water to drink. You have no roads to travel, no hospitals to go to. And there's a constant insecurity. The government doesn't care about anybody. And then most importantly, you have 1% of the population controlling the resources meant for 99%. He said to yourself, is it worth it to live in relative comfort and abandon humanity of this size and proportion? So I think that's the magnet that keeps bringing me back to what I do now, or what I've always done.
All right, now let's link it a little bit to politics.
Yes.
There's a little bit of wariness for some persons when they see activists.
Yeah.
Because for some reason, people can't believe that another human being can be so altruistic. What is he gaining? What is happening behind the scene? You know, we had allegations, one Oluwatosin Adeniji, who's also an activist, accusing you of collecting money or grants in her name. And, you know, so a lot of people tend to look at activists who are moving into politics as people who want to take opportunity of others. How do you fight this narrative?
Well, you know, the question should be, how do I feel when people lie against me? You know, I don't feel bad. I think, you know, at different periods in your life, whether you're altruistic or not, people are going to have things to say about you. If you don't want people to lie against you, make up stories about you, don't live a public life. Even if you don't live a public, even in your private life, you can get into trouble. One is to dismiss it as a complete lie. It didn't happen. And it was a young lady who was helping me out during my detention. And I will completely, forever be grateful to her wherever she may be, who felt unhappy, and decided that the way to go about it was to just make up a story. But when I look at it and the balance of it, it was a lot more she did in my life when I was in detention. Nobody thought I could be helped or reached out to. Every day she brought food to me. So if she made a mistake, I don't think it's enough to cancel her. That's why I responded online the way I responded. First, you can't get a grant in another person's name. If it's that easy, people will be collecting grants up and down. Secondly, there was no grant, no such thing happened, and I made that clear. And people will give out grants. Don't just keep quiet. If you embezzle grants meant for anything, for that matter, because there are foundations, they are also accountable to the people who put the money out there. So I just want that to be clear. But it's not what is new to people like me. When I was running in 2018, one lady came out and said that I collected pictures and videos of kids that were being raped and sold it to the Lagos State government, and I didn't publish them. And when she couldn't sustain it, she just she moved on. A lot of people say, why don't you sue her? I was like, if I sue, by the time we are done in court, all of you would have forgotten the lie she told about me. So I leave that to her conscience. In I think it was this year, she came out openly that she was working for Tinubu. So probably they sent her in 2019. But it's part of politics. You have to live with some egregious things if you get involved in politics. So what is there for me to gain? Nothing. The only thing I can gain is to feel good that I live in the midst of people who are happy.
But would you play that kind of politics too, if your opponents are doing it?
No, if I wanted to, I would have been doing it in the past. I have the platform to play around with people's reputation if I want to, but I don't do that. Sowore Reporters has been sued several times, but I don't know how many lawsuits I've had about people who felt like their reputations were damaged. And when we get to the courtrooms, they discover that it's not true. And they kept getting more and more desperate. I've been sued by pastors, I've been sued by governors, I've been sued by, private individuals who felt like stories that were written about them were not true or were damaging. So if I can't prove something, I don't go near it. But if I can prove it, I'll stand by it. I will put it out there and stand by it. So that's been the situation. Maybe there are people who felt like because Sowore Reporters is writing stories about politically exposed persons or private individuals, that's their own way of also getting back. It's like you do it to other people, so let's do it to you. Let's see how you feel about it. So there's a lot of that, and they throw all kinds of things out there. But you have to, again, understand that this is how it works in the political world, that people will do all kinds of things to you in order to gain advantage over you. There are people there's a guy who spent over 5 years now just pushing one narrative against me, that I was the one who brought Buhari to power. He brought Buhari to power. And if the narrative is not gaining traction, he will do giveaways so that more people can believe the narrative, or you sponsor the post, referring to Jonathan's special assistant on media at the point, Reno Mockery. So, but I never woke up one day feeling bad about it, because that's his job. He's using that as a way of looking for political power or to gain political attention. He lives the life of working for politicians. So he needs to be able to prove to them that he can do the job. And if he can target me, he does that. He probably gets paid just to focus on me, because he did it for 5 years. And one day he stopped talking about me because there was another job to do, which is working for Atiku. But the question you ask yourself, if you say I brought Buhari to power, what about Atiku, who gave him a jet, $50 million, and he confessed openly to it, and you're working for him now. How is it that you didn't see the person who gave $50 million to Buhari in 2015, 2014? And a journalist who was reporting on the corruption in a government where you serve became your target. What I'm saying is fair game. Is as long as you do politics, you should expect so many of these things more thrown at you.
Right now, we'll move now to party politics from there to your exact plans on governance. The AAC, some persons believe that, or there's a rhetoric that you've taken over the party. For instance, you only have to step down because your constitution says you can't be national chairman and presidential candidates. So in that respect, how do you, because you are apparently a champion of democracy, you constantly, put it in the faces of the administration that they should do better. What do you make of these allegations that you are the one and all in the AAC, and others are not really given opportunity because you are the most, will I say, visible, and so automatically everyone else is sidelined?
No, that's not true. First, there's nothing in the AAC constitution that says that you can't be presidential candidate and chairman. Nothing. So that's not true. Just to dismiss that. I'm not the only person in AAC. In fact, I and others founded AAC ourselves, and by appointment, because at that point there was no time to do our national convention to elect officials. We adopted a position that everybody who signed up as chairman, secretary should run AAC until we have a special convention. So shortly after 2019 election, a conspiracy was hatched against those of us who founded AAC. And the secretary then was hired by the government and some other interests to take over the party. They got a judgment from a federal high court and took over the party. So for 3 years, up until about 3 weeks ago, I was not in control of AAC. We went to court and started battling them until a court of appeal in Abuja here took a decision, a judgment, in which they said it was wrong for the lower court, the federal high court, Justice Inyang Ekwo, to have pushed us out of the party. They had no jurisdiction to have done that. So within those 3 years, ask yourself, who was managing AAC? It was hijackers. So out of 4 years that the party has been in existence, I've probably now managed it for only 6 months, entire 4 years. These other people were the only ones recognized by INEC, and whomever, they were presenting candidates, they were aligning with other parties, particularly the APC and PDP, wherever it was convenient for them. So this is why it's important for journalists to do their research sometimes, so that you can have a proper grasp of some of these things that are happening. Of course, on our end, as me and others, we didn't relent. We kept pushing that narrative that AAC cannot be hijacked while we were in court. But we took the route of appealing the judgment so that we can retake our party. And it hasn't been up to 4 weeks now that the party was restored. It was restored to us on June 3rd. Today I think it's June 30th. So it's less than a month. And immediately we had to revive the structures, the legitimate structures of the party, go into elections to elect party candidates who were aspirants who are now candidates. So for us, we had to do the presidential election. I was the one who voluntarily, what the Constitution says is that if you are running as presidential, or any candidate for that matter, you should step down duration of that particular exercise. So that's what I did. But I plan to step down completely during or after the special convention that is yet to be determined. I will step down so that others can carry on. So I believe in that. But just so that you are well enlightened about it, I haven't been in charge of AAC officially, any one of us who are founders, up until a month ago. They took that action, I think, in July of 2019. So it was less than a year that AAC had been. AAC was formed in August of 2018. By July, we had been kicked out by special interest, and we just returned to office on June 3rd of 2022.
All right. Just a few more now. Move on into governance proper. How do you marry revolution now and your political ambition? Because some persons say the idea of revolution now is, like, what is the idea of revolution now? Because some persons believe it is in contrast with politics. They say, okay, he has come again, he's running. If he doesn't get it, he goes back to revolution now. Are they in tandem? Let's assume you won, you became president today. What happens to revolution now? Are you doing it as the incumbent, or you being there is already the revolution?
I've been talking about revolution since I started running. In fact, I've been talking about revolution before I started running. If you see some of my speeches on YouTube, it's always been my position that one day the only solution to Nigeria's problem is a complete turnaround. And that can be achieved in several ways. First, it can be achieved by social consciousness, political consciousness, that minds are made up, that there are things you accept and don't accept, and that one day all these forces will coalesce. Participation in politics, I've said sometimes, is part of the revolutionary goal, to show to people the alternatives that are there, that we can take this route. Sometimes it's to show to people also the contradictions that is involved in being lied to, that certain solutions can solve the problem. If you look at the history of the ANC, the African National Congress in South Africa, I think they were formed in 1928. They didn't come to power until 1994. But they kept talking about one day in which there will be revolutionary governance in their country. So, but to cap your question, it is to say that if an election produces an impossible candidate that is of a revolutionary mind, that is the beginning of a revolution there. And you can see some of even this period that we are in, that there's more social, consciousness. People are registering to vote, and they're saying if the votes don't count, there'll be something else. It is part of how these things, work out. And I have spoken several times about the French Revolution. Most people don't read about the French Revolution, but they just throw it carelessly around. That it took over 10 years of different kinds of contradictory ideas. In fact, some of the revolutionaries were killing themselves, hurting themselves, before it came to head one day. And what triggered it was the price of bread. Just like NSAS, police brutality, almost triggered a revolution in Nigeria in 2020. So people who don't have revolutionary depth may misconceive what has been happening. An election in 2023, whether it produces a revolutionary candidate or a reactionary candidate, would also open people's eyes to more reasons why the country should not continue the way it is today.
Do you think this threatens the government and will probably make them not allow it happen? Because when you use the French Revolution and they see the result of that, I don't think they feel too safe. I think the other day we had President Muhammadu Buhari saying those young people were coming to remove them.
Exactly. Yeah.
So don't you think it would maybe
the
spur them into something else?
The people are not supposed to be at the mercy of the emotional condition of their leaders. Leaders are supposed to deliver on promises they make to them. So, in fact, the most powerful democracy, or part of democracy, is that right for citizens to make decisions that are in their own interest. And you don't have to conform with what those in power are expecting or what they want. In fact, the moment we submit to total expectation and control of those in power, we have destroyed democracy. Yeah, because it's supposed to bring about, it's supposed to be about choice and bring about changes that are expected. So who cares whether the people in government are afraid or happy about what we want. The most important thing is what the majority is. Democracy is described in one word or two words as majority rule, not minority rule or minority interest.
Right.
But that's not to say that the minority is totally ignored. But not a wicked minority.
All right. All right, now let's go now into your plans. I'm going to come up with some numbers and your take on it. So let's start with something that involves the economy and something that allegedly holds back the government from doing certain things. The issue of petrol subsidy. Let me just call out some numbers. Petrol subsidy payments grew by 349.42% from 350 billion naira in 2019 to 1.57 trillion naira in 2021. What's your plan for subsidy?
It is to tell you absolutely incorrectly that what they call subsidy, it's just theft of national resources, both money and other forms of resources. The way to address the subsidy situation is not to threaten to remove subsidy or allow market forces to reign. It is to address the issue holistically. We need refineries. If you are exporting crude and buying it back, you have ruined your ability to control prices, because now you have no power over supply and you have no power over demand. So you have lost out in pricing. But if you have control over supply, then market forces can take control of demand. You can have a say in pricing. Most countries that are oil producing have refineries. Why is it that you make crude oil in Nigeria, put them on a barge, travel for days, refine them in a refinery somewhere, sometimes owned by Nigerian leaders or their collaborators in the business community, and you sell it back? You're not even selling back all the outcome of the crude oil, all the products. You're only buying back just one product, because when you distill crude oil, several products come out of it. You only buy diesel, kerosene, gasoline, which is petrol, and maybe one other product. The rest is to the advantage of the distillers. So we have to build refineries, and nobody can convince me that an individual can build what they call the largest refinery on the continent of Africa, but the largest country, the most populous country and the continent of Africa cannot build refineries or fix refineries that are not working. I think this government has, in 7 years, had enough opportunity and time to fix at least 2 of the refineries to be working at full capacity and build more. How is it that Niger Delta militants or small-time, pipeline operators, I don't want to call them thieves, are able to refine products, and you can get diesel from them, but the Nigerian government cannot do the same thing? So without solving that problem, you cannot talk about whether there's subsidy or not, and that's where we'll go to work at first. It's not just enough to be throwing out numbers. We must also investigate and audit these numbers if they are real or concocted, because that's what happened the first time in 2012 that led to the uprising against Goodluck Jonathan. He removed fuel subsidies. People said no. We want to know why we can't benefit from the oil product that come to our country. And they found out after the uprising, when they went into investigating, discovering that a lot of the numbers were made up. Some of the marketers or importers were importing not fuel, but water.
So how do you hope to fight this? It seems there's a very well-oiled structure holding the country back from moving.
Yes, there's no doubt about that.
Especially, let's assume you are with the AAC. If you win the presidency, you're not. You probably have no person in the House of Reps, in the Senate. So how can you fight this system? We saw the other day the UBA boss complaining that more than I think about 90% of crude is stolen.
Yes.
So it means that the people doing it, they are very powerful. How do you fight them?
See, the question is, did you have to wait for the UBA guy to tell you that you're stealing crude? when Sowore has been reporting it since 26 and named people who were involved in it, army generals, you know, civilians within the country. It's big business, right? But here is my answer. We are coming in with a revolutionary government, a people's government. And anybody who is standing in the way of progress, the people will handle themselves. You know, you can be a senator today in Nigeria, and you can be recalled if the people feel like you are misrepresenting them. And that's how revolutionary governments operate. It's not going to be a dictatorship. I've said it before, because the reason I'm in a better position to fight these guys is that I know them. I've reported on them. There's virtually no politician, top 3 candidates running as president today that I have not reported on. All these whole Bola Tinubu drug stories, I reported in 2012. I mean, is it 2009? That's far back. I went to Chicago and got copies in their archive, bought it. I had to pay some money for it and put it out of how he forfeited $600 million to the government in the US because he was found dealing in heroin with his wife and his so-called mother. People are making it sound like it's new. And so I'm just using that as an example. I once went to Atiku Abubakar's house outside of Washington, D.C. in a place called Potomac. It was a mansion. Went to interview him. You know, as soon as I did the interview, left the place, the FBI swooped on him. He left the US, never went back. I mean, it was more complicated than that. I was the one who was following up on those stories. I was the one who published all the houses in Potomac owned by Nigerian governors, Ojizo Kalu, you know, and several other governors, Alamaseya. I was the one who dug out all their businesses, went to the UK, found Ibori's house, found he had a brand new Bentley inside his garage that he's never driven before, found Saraki's house, Benga Daniel, you know, Rwanu in those days. I did all the work. So I've been fighting them my entire life. So you need a fighter for this next battle. And I'm better positioned to do that. I have scars to show for it, you know, but I also have the networks to take on this behemoth problem of corruption, godfathers, and the buccaneers who are running down this country.
All right, speaking about fighting, let's talk about what I would consider probably the biggest issue, because no matter what plans you make for Nigeria, if there's no safe space for it to happen, it will not work. What's your plan for insecurity, especially with the numbers we're getting? We have the numbers that certain war-torn countries are having, and we are supposedly at peace. So how do you plan to tackle insecurity?
You see, you can't tackle insecurity without holistically, you know, understanding what causes insecurity. And in tackling insecurity in Nigeria, you must have a short-term goal, a medium-term goal, and a long-term goal. The short-term goal is to motivate, train, and acquire equipment for security services. Let them share intelligence, have them centrally managed by a competent officer, especially as the NSA, and make sure they go to war and stop the bleeding. The medium term is to start looking at how to equip ourselves with modern technology that don't require too many boots on the ground. I don't know why we don't have drones flying all over different parts of the war-torn or crisis-ridden areas of the country at this point, where we're not gathering intelligence and ensuring that our police is well motivated and trained, paid, compensated, for them to even carry out things as simple as searches. I cannot imagine that somebody will be kidnapped in Abuja and will be driven to Delta State or Abia State and nobody stopped them on the way. You know, and the long term is to solve the economic and social problems that are causes of poverty and inequality that drives people into crime. You know, to have a constitution in the country that addresses concerns about our similarities and dissimilarities, handle so many of those very explosive areas of our lives, religion, ethnicity, that causes insecurity, because so many of them some of our security problems are natural. and but most importantly, to solve the problem of inequality, hunger, starvation, unemployment, and those social dislocations in our system that throws up the numbers you're talking about, because they don't come from nowhere. They come from the atrocities our leadership has caused in the past. There was a time in this country that the reason for spike in armed robbery were soldiers who were brought back from Sierra Leone and Liberia, who brought out Uzis in gas cylinders that were cut open and sealed. And when they came back and they were not properly resettled, they took to crime. So leadership is key in addressing these problems, but you must understand that there's something that needs to be done immediately. There's some things that needs to be done along the line, and there's something that needs to be done to permanently resolve the issues. International cooperations, sharing of intelligence, because the international community, for instance, don't trust our military, our security services now to share critical intelligence with them, even when they see Boko Haram moving or they see external fighters entering into Nigeria. They don't tell us anymore, because each time they tell us, those people are notified in advance, and that's led to the death of a lot of innocent fighters, soldiers, on the Nigerian side of fence. So the moment you restore confidence and trust in dealing with the international community, you can solve the bigger problems of terrorism, and also to push the army out of within. The policing of Nigeria, or crime control, is supposed to be done by the police. But everywhere you go now, soldiers are in control of things as simple as traffic offenses, whereas the policemen who are supposed to be doing policing are running after VIPs. They become VIP protection units only, which is sad. So if you have an understanding of these problems, solving them becomes very easy. And then courage is needed to tackle, because something kept coming up in your conversation. You're talking about the cabals and the cartels and the oligarchs that are running this country. They are very powerful. There's no question about it. But they can be confronted. There's no country that's not had a period in their history where cartels were, even in the US. There was a time the mafia were in control. Italy is still dealing with the mafia till today. But you see that determined leadership has made a difference. Colombia had drug lords, Mexicans, all these countries have had, but there's a point in their life they say, enough is enough. We can't contribute to, we can't continue to live in the midst of brutes. And the society decided to come together and they get rid of them, get rid of drug lords and corrupt police officers all at once or over time. But one thing it boils down to is leadership.
Right, sorry to cut in there. Speaking about your boldness or your bravery, I want to ask a funny question. There are talks about Muslim ticket, Christian ticket and all that, and the issues. Some persons believe the reason you are so bold is because you have access to the supernatural.
Jazz.
Exactly. Yeah. So now I was wondering, I don't know officially, what is your religion? We know that when you announced around the period you announced your presidency for 2023, it was in the river, I think in Ondo or thereabouts, and then I was actually in court the day you came with a native doctor, a babalawo, and you just said that's just how he dresses and that's his culture. There was nothing wrong. So I just want to know officially, what is your religion?
I do not have any intention to announce any particular religion to anybody. Maybe it's the easiest way to say I'm not religious but spiritual. Yes. Because a country that's multi-ethnic, multi-religious should not have people who are touting religion. I'm a Pan-Africanist. I believe in everything African, their way of dressing, how we look. And I don't have those arguments, trying to defend how we dress to court. There was a lawyer who was wearing some kind of juju dress to court in the last few days. I support him completely. In fact, I'm still shocked that our lawyers are still carrying wigs all over the place when people who introduce the wigs themselves have abandoned it. The same thing goes for religion. The people that introduced religion to us have gotten rid of a lot of portions of religious texts that rules our life, but we're still here killing ourselves over religious beliefs and convictions. And the people who brought it have started to downgrade the rough part of it, because religion should be dynamic. It should live in, it should be real time. But I don't like to have this conversation about jazz and all that. I want this country to work. If jazz can work, if I could, and if I think that politicians will be afraid of jazz, I'll make them swear to it.
That's an enlightened stance on that. So now, speaking of enlightenment and education, I think the World Bank said recently that we now have, Nigeria has the most out-of-school children. What's your plan for that? That's the primary, secondary level, all the way to tertiary, where we keep seeing incessant strikes. We're basically in the electionary season now. In other countries, this would be a constant issue.
Yes.
So how do you plan to handle it?
And just before I talk about how to handle it, I want to challenge journalists in the country to really, I think Nigerian journalists need the national conference where they say the truth to themselves and how far they have failed during this electioneering period. You see, you can get me into the studio to talk about this issue. You're asking fundamental questions, intelligent questions, but you can't get Atiku to be here with you. You can't get Tinubu to be here with you, but you guys pay more attention to the people who don't come for interviews and their views and lack of it than those of us who are available to speak to these issues. But having said that, you're talking about education. Again, we'll break it down to, because it's primary, there's secondary and tertiary education. The same way for healthcare, primary, secondary, and tertiary healthcare or advanced healthcare. It's for us to understand that to get rid of out-of-school kids, not to kill them, but to bring them back to school. Is to immediately find very solid solutions to getting them educated. Mass education, just as transportation should be addressed with mass transit or mass transportation. And for me, I am no longer convinced that basic education can solve our problem. Basic education did not anticipate technology. And what I want to do is to make sure that I don't focus more on physical classrooms, but virtual classrooms. What is it? If I can get some 20 kids in this place, it can be a church or a mosque, and we can fix a TV on the wall, and they can have a teacher teaching maths to 1,000 students or pupils. I'll do that immediately. In some of the ways to do it is to partner with all these, what's it called, cable companies, to provide viewing centers, the same way they provide football viewing centers, to provide education viewing centers, learning centers, e-learning centers for these kids. Do you know why I think this would work? Is because no matter where you are in this country today, there's start times somewhere. There's a viewing center, and all the kids watch soccer, no matter how young or old people are in this country. So but we convert those viewing centers, in addition to the existing schools, to mass learning. We're forcing whatever you want, wherever you may be, we'll bring you to school, or the e-learning center, because it's going to take a while to build enough classrooms to solve this problem. And because resources is not available, is to look for the low-hanging fruits. And this was done during COVID lockdown. A lot of kids were going to school. I had a friend in this Abuja who was going to a London primary school from their house here in Abuja. You just wake up in the morning, you can tie a wrapper, and that will save the environment a bit. Because
it would be so interactive. Students need
the students can always interact, whichever, the students that are coming to there will be a person who is managing, there will be a teacher who is organizing it, but they just won't be that full classroom, teachers, all the bureaucracies involved in schooling. And we're talking about how to massively educate people now. But this will require also investment. It will require investment in technology. But the advantage with this solution is that the kids here can actually go to school in London without leaving Nigeria. Or we can talk to foreign partners and say, can you give us the login code for your classrooms. My kids went to school for a year during lockdown in the US without leaving the house. Of course, they were bored to death because of lack of interaction, but what we did was to be creative. The back of the house was converted to a soccer field, so they can do physical exercise. But that knowledge that they gain, they will never forget. Don't forget also they're interacting with their mates, but virtually, it's non-physical. Because the world is not going to reverse for Nigeria. It's Nigeria that have to run to meet where the world has advanced to at this point. But that's short term. To get at least 6 million kids out of the streets in the first 4 years of being in government. Invest in university education. Also, make it technologically sound and interactive. That I was approached during COVID, and even now, to teach 2 classes in the US. I just don't have the time because I have to go to court and get arrested all the time. I don't know if I have that opportunity, and the privilege to be able to come to class. So I ignored it. And they were willing to pay me what I was getting paid when I was teaching in the US, just to dress up, halfway, put a laptop in front of me or my phone to teach a class for 3 hours once a week. They're going to pay me an average of $4,000 per semester, 4,500. You convert that to Nigerian currencies, about 3 million naira. That's some solid amount of money. And this is to teach classes that are not here. Harvard had programs, free classes throughout COVID period. They continue them after COVID. So that has to be the case. I would not be the president of Nigeria where schools are shut down, universities are shut down for even 1 week.
All right, yes. Sorry to cut in there. We have just a little time left, so I have to run through some of the issues now. Let's talk about your chances. In the last election, we saw the governor of Kaduna State, mocking the numbers you had, about 33,000 or so. What's your plan this time around, especially considering? Let me look for the phrase. You called the PVC at the Ekiti election
poverty verification
card.
Yes.
So how do you want to fight that? And also, that's for the major parties who are alleged to partake in that. What about the other parties? Are you threatened by, say, someone like Peter Obi now and the buzz that seems to be going around him?
No, not at all. Let me address El-Rufai, who I know very well. When he came into exile when I was running Sahara Reporters directly. That's El-Rufai for you. El-Rufai is a clown to a large extent, and I know this. But he's always mocked everybody. When Buhari was trying to win election, he mocked him. And now he's the first person to be on his knees whenever he sees Buhari. I'm not hoping that he'll be on his knees whenever I win, because I don't want him to be on his knees. But I hope that I'll win and he can take back his words, just like he took back his vomit on Buhari. But to talk about others, I'm completely happy that the field is controlled by some level. The political situation this time is controlled by some level of political consciousness. That more young people are pushing and saying, no, we will not stand aloof this time around. This is some work that I've been doing over these years, moving people to the barricades, whether it's ballot revolution or physical revolution. I've always wanted a revolution where there's mass participation in changing the narrative and overthrowing the old order.
But wouldn't you feel bad if that isn't directed in your way?
No, why would I feel bad? You see, the interesting thing about all this is that there will be several stages of it. There will be hysteria, there will be some kind of concocted outrage, what I call organized outrage, and that won't lead to anywhere eventually. But our job is to make sure that people don't vote for, those who are carrying out PVC, who are running their PVC, poverty verification card, to mobilize people. But we still have 7 solid months to go. Chances are very bright if there will be elections. My worry is not the chances I would have. It's to ensure that we have free and fair election. If election is free and fair, it means that the outcomes will show that it's people with brain power that will become the next set of leaders. And I'm not the only one who is running in my party. You know. So if you look at it, in 2019, there was almost 78 presidential candidates. In 2022, there are only about 16 of us that are running in this election. But of all the candidates, the only person who has been around since 2019 is myself. You know, I went to jail, you know, I got shot at, I got my nose broken, my brother killed. I'm here. I'm doing the work that is important, which is to keep educating, conscientizing, and mobilizing people to go to the barricades. Like I said, the barricades could be the polling units, or it could be the street. But this is going to lead somewhere eventually. If we make the wrong choice, it just means that we're going to have to stay on the barricades longer than we should be on vacation.
So is there any hope of a merger? Do you see someone like...
Okay, you wanted to say something?
I was going to say, you know, you got a lot of flack when you called Peter Obi unprepared, or I think...
Yes, when we went to Egypt, when I heard he went to Egypt to go and learn how to bring electricity, I said it's not prepared, and I stand by that. I also said that he's an internally displaced politician and has gone to a political orphanage. It wasn't the first time I said it. The Labour Party is a Labour Party without workers because of the way they've managed the party over these years. And I said it even before Peter Obi joined them. I'd gone to a political commission meeting here in Abuja, Jayadua Center, and said it that my problem with Labour Party was because it has turned itself to an orphanage. Anybody that loses out in the major party, where can I go? I go to the Labour Party. And they were upset because that was the truth. But for me, people are learning the hard way because a lot of newcomers to the political scene, and they are the ones who say, don't criticize. I mean, where do you go in the world that you don't criticize candidates? It's not, it's like a no-brainer. But, now they're learning the hard way. The tone is changing. They understand that there will be scrutiny. There will be more scrutiny because people have been screwed before by the same process of hysteria. Don't touch Buhari. It's megascare. Megascare has now become an African banza. So you will learn the hard way. And it's for us.
So do you think they are similar? You mentioned
everybody that says that a candidate should not be criticized in 2022 is trying to replicate the Buhari fraud. That was how Buhari was packaged. If he coughed, everyone was like, wow.
But Peter Obi has antecedents that are in the public, just as...
Well, what are the antecedents? Let me ask you.
He says it every time, go and verify.
Exactly. But do you have to go and verify to see antecedents? If I tell you now, there's a good road in the US, beautiful road, can you go to the US and verify? You just type it on Google. It will show you. It can even show you live vehicles that are on it. If they tell you that Singapore has one of the best airports in the world, and they still go and verify, that means you have to go and take a visa, then carry a camera and go to. That don't make sense. But you see, all those things will fizzle out because they are all part of a political game and strategy to kind of overwhelm the public with falsehood, propaganda, intimidation, harassment, sometimes outright threats. That's been the nature of but it's all part of politics. But can it solve the problem of real scrutiny? No. Because you have a state government in Anambra saying, you had Peter Obi saying, oh, the investment I made in a beer company has reached $100 million. And the state government was so upset. They had to come out and say, no, it's not like that. Your 12 million investment is now $3 million worth. It's worthless. So those scrutinies will continue to come. If somebody said Tinubu went to University of Chicago, if people go there and write to University of Chicago, said no, he didn't cover it, they now changed it to Chicago State University. They said, well, one Tinubu came here. And then they said, but how did he get here? We can't find his secondary school certificate, we can't find primary. How did these things happen? Those questions have not been answered. But people will keep demanding that the questions be answered. So you can't tell people to shut up if they're asking Tinubu for his certificate and tell them not to shut up your heart, but tell them that if they ask about Peter Obi's claims that he turned Anambra to Dubai, that people should not ask us, because Anambra is right here. We don't need to go and verify. You can just make a call, So I'm just addressing that holistically. so that nobody's under any illusion that candidates will not be challenged, or this whole hysteria about, oh, you know, how dare you ask my candidate about, you know, where he is. They say, go and verify, or you shut up, or, you know, those things will fizzle out. We have all those were shafts. At the point, substance will have to be the main driving force, and I hope we get to that point before the political process is hijacked again by flops and criminal politicians who will turn it around and make it a money business. Because wherever they don't have any substance, they have other strategies they can put in place. They have distractions. I think there is a ministry of distraction in this country, by the way, that when people get serious too much, they just ask Tonto Dike and someone to fight.
That's a straight bullet there for Tonto.
Tonto is actually a deputy governor candidate.
Yes, exactly.
And I respect that. But I'm just using that phrase as one of social media phrases that you can just see what distracts people. Or, you know, you can go and sponsor BB Niger. Second edition.
I was going to say that. I think it speaks to what people say that the youths are easily distracted.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, to round off now, I think we've gone far. I want to hear from you rather than, you know, going to verify.
Yes.
If you haven't already, would you be declaring your assets? And I say this because Serap recently put out a challenge, and so far, we've only seen that the SDP candidate, Adewale Adebayo, has agreed to that challenge, or whatever it's called. What about you? Would you be doing that?
Oh yeah, I said that as far back as 2018, 2019, that I would declare my assets on the fly, you know, and I can declare them even here and there. And I have one house in Nigeria, in my village. I don't know how much it's worth, but I probably spent like 5 million naira to build it. That's where my mom lives right now. I have a house in the US where my kids, my 2 kids and my wife are living, the 2 kids that I know of. I probably have like a car right now that is functioning. I have another one that's broken down. So it'll probably be one car that is alive and a dead car. You know, a couple of shoes and clothes and a laptop.
Nothing else.
3 iPhones.
That's something. All right. All right. Thank you very much for coming on Talk Talk.
Yes. Oh yes, I should add Sahara Reporters, but I don't know how much it's worth.